And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. And boy, Paul, things are really starting to heat up down the stretch here on day two. We've got 3 rounds to go, and one player in the field is knocking at the door of top 8, and that is Logan Nettles, who is 11-1 coming into the round, playing Naya Adventures here in Standard. One more win for Logan, and that's a locked top 8. I'm not talking about like mathematically, I'm talking about you're done for the day, Logan, take the rest of the day off, but it's gonna be about as hard as possible to get the win this round. He's playing against Seth Manfield on Is It Dragons, and well, Seth's one of the toughest players in the field, basically in any tournament that he plays, and that's gonna mean a difficult task here for Logan. Now, if we think instead about the players, but about the decks, Paul, what's the breakdown here?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty close matchup here. I think the deck that really, you saw in an interview yesterday, I believe, where Logan really just wanted to dodge Sultai, but he feels pretty good about all the other decks in the format. This deck really has difficulty with sweepers, cards such as Shadow's Verdict. But against Seth's deck, it's got some 1-for-1 removal spells. He can really kind of handle that. Now, if you're on Seth's side, it's really, really important for you to just kind of keep the board clear as much as possible in the early game. The cards such as Bone Crusher Giant and Frostbite are extremely important. One thing to note, though, is that Seth actually choosing to trim a Frostbite to kind of better prepare himself for the slower matchups, and has only 3 instead of 4 in the main.
Well, he'll miss it here, no doubt about that. Doesn't have one in sight, but close enough. He's got a Bone Crusher Giant, but Seth knows that he can hold off on killing the Jaspera Sentinel if he even chooses to do so.
Yeah, this is, Logan doesn't really have a great play here. You do see that he's got a Giant Killer as really his only option for this turn. If he does play out the Giant Killer and it lives, it does give him access to red mana, which would kind of unlock his hand and allow him to play cards like Bone Crusher Giant or that Showdown of the Skulls in his hand. At the same time, the Giant Killer is an extremely important card in this matchup. It's a card that allows you to kill opposing Bone Crusher Giants, along with the most important card in Seth's deck, which is the Goldspan Dragon that he has.
Seth has to make his decision now. He has all the information. Do I want to kill Giant Killer? Do I want to kill Jaspera Sentinel? Or I can bounce something. I can even go upstairs. He's got options, but he doesn't want to let this Giant Killer hit the battlefield if he is planning on killing the Sentinel, and he wants to make sure that the mana doesn't come from it. So let's see if he does, in fact, want to kill that Sentinel, or if he's decided he doesn't mind it. Yeah, he's going to let that resolve, and the Sentinel's going to sit on the battlefield as well.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to look to kill the Sentinel still. You'll eventually find a way to get one of them off the battlefield, but it looks like he's actually choosing to save the Stomp here and going for a Brazen Borrower instead on the Sentinel, which effectively does the same thing, right? You kind of shut Logan off of red mana, at least from the Jaspera Sentinel, and prevent him from casting a 4-drop here.
Yeah, the one downside to the Borrower over the Stomp is that it does open the window for Logan to use his mana here by casting a Stomp of his own. Now, that wasn't a particularly effective play, right? It was just 2 damage upstairs, but it was mana efficiency for Logan, at the least.
Yeah, and the nice thing about kind of that tempo play from the Brazen Borrower is right now, Logan isn't really putting on a whole lot of pressure here, right? He's going to run out an Elite Spellbinder, but, Seth's hand lines up pretty well if Logan's plan is to just kind of play a bunch of 3-mana creatures every single turn. The way Logan kind of gets below this is by trying to cast multiple spells in a turn.
Mystical Dispute, the good old-fashioned way, is going to take care of that Elite Spellbinder, put it into the yard. The turn gets passed back over to Manfield, who's surveying the scene. He's going to go for Saw It Coming as a foretell, and he's also has Brazen Borrower on an adventure there. This is going to leave him with not super many options. He can cast Stomp or Disdainful Stroke this turn. He can also Saw It Coming if there's something really important that comes off the top here for Logan.
Yeah, I think Logan, obviously very mindful here that there could be a Saw It Coming here, that's foretold. So kind of has to decide what he wants to run a potential counterspell into here. He can opt to just go for an Elite Spellbinder here or a Bone Crusher Giant. The upside of playing Bone Crusher Giant over something like an Elite Spellbinder here is that it will not get stomped if that's one of the cards in Seth Manfield's hand.
Oh, sure.
However, playing the Elite Spellbinder means that even if it does get stomped, you do get to slow down Seth from potentially playing a very devastating Goldspan Dragon that he could potentially play next turn, given that he's at 4 mana. Next turn, he could go land Goldspan Dragon.
Manfield deciding what answer he would like to use for this Elite Spellbinder. His options are to counter it now or to kill it with Stomp. If he does decide to kill it with Stomp, the tax will have to be paid.
Yeah, note that if Logan takes Saw It Coming out of Seth Manfield's hand, I don't think you can foretell it. So then all of a sudden you're looking at a 5 mana counterspell if Seth ever wants to cast the Saw It Coming.
Seth deep in the tank here. He's going to let the Spellbinder resolve, but before the ability resolves, he's going to fire off Stomp here to make sure that the Bone Crusher is safely in the adventure zone and leave Logan with fewer choices. Disdainful Stroke or Saw It Coming are the options for the Elite Spellbinder ability.
Yeah, so now, of course, Saw It Coming can counter more spells. However, the really important spell that Logan wants to resolve here is that Showdown of the Skalds, right, to kind of rebuild his hand. And the Disdainful Stroke is just a much more efficient way to counter that spell. So if he wants to kind of try to tie up Seth Manfield's mana, could be interested in just countering the taking the Disdainful Stroke here instead.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at the hand here from Logan, yeah, the Showdown of the Skalds is kind of a game winner, right? If that thing hits the battlefield, it's a massive influx of cards for Logan as well as board presence in the moment. So he's probably going to try to save that for last, given the information that he has here, try to run Seth out of action. Doesn't have a whole lot to do it with. The Bone Crusher Giant deserves some attention. The Tangled Florahedron a little less so. Maybe Gigantha in a few turns could be on the menu. But it's just a lot of counter magic to work your way through. And he ends up deciding on Saw It Coming there, Paul.
Ooh. That was a nice draw. That's a card that could potentially warrant a counterspell. So this is a turn where Logan can go Clarion Spirit into Bone Crusher Giant, and in that situation, he might be either able to resolve something or fight through Seth Manfield's counterspells to potentially try and resolve a Showdown of the Skalds. One card that I want to speak to that would be phenomenal if it did resolve right now, given the way the board state is, would be Drannith Magistrate. Because there's 4 cards exiled right now.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, Seth has more cards either on adventures or exiled than he does in his hand right now. And here's Clarion Spirit, a very nice top deck there for Logan that is going to make Seth actually react to him on some level and probably by means of a counterspell. Yeah, the Saw It Coming that was foretold is going to get cast on the Clarion Spirit.
Yeah, but now Logan's going to be able to put a credible threat on the battlefield here. Yeah, finally, he's going to be able to play the Bone Crusher Giant, and right now Seth cannot answer the Bone Crusher Giant with a counterspell.
That's right.
And then Seth is going to feel some pressure, right? You have a Bone Crusher Giant on the battlefield. At that point, you can't just continue taking giant damage from the Bone Crusher here. So he might be inclined to cast the Bone Crusher Giant of his own. So what Seth really wants to find here is probably just an untapped land, because if he does, he can play a Bone Crusher Giant and still have Disdainful Stroke up for a Showdown of the Skalds.
Well, he found a Bone Crusher Giant. It's fine draw, right? It's hard for Bone Crusher to be terrible, but he will not have the option of leaving up Disdainful Stroke and putting something in the way of the opposing Bone Crusher. So if he wants to protect against a potential Showdown of the Skalds or, name your more expensive card, he's going to have to take some damage to do it, and that's what he's going to do here.
And look at Seth here, choosing to play it patiently. He is aware that one of the most devastating cards for him in this matchup is if Logan does get to resolve Showdown of the Skalds, right? Because that's just 4 cards. You get access to 4 cards here, and then on the following turn, all of a sudden, you get to play a barrage of spells that not only puts you ahead on cards, but additionally, it also just allows you to put a bunch of +1/+1 counters onto your creatures, which allows you to kind of fight through cards like Stomp and Frostbite.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he's playing around that card exclusively here, right? Like, the only other 4 mana spell is a Crowan War, which wouldn't be a have an effect on this board state. The only other targets are Showdown of the Skalds for Logan.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if Logan is playing Toski. No, he's just got the Crowan Wars here.
Yeah, no Toskies, and he doesn't go up into the the dragon range of things or anything like that in the main here, at least. So there you go. Seth Manfield understanding what's important in the matchup, but he's paying a price here. He just took 6 damage for the privilege of not letting Logan go for it.
And the thing is, he took 6 damage, and all he's going to be able to do is just stomp a Jaspera Sentinel or perhaps a Giant Killer at this point, because Logan has access to so much mana. So now you kill the 1/2. If you draw a land, you can play Bone Crusher Giant and then have that actually trade. But because Seth didn't draw a land, I mean, Seth is in a lot of trouble here. He's going to be forced to kind of just run out this Bone Crusher Giant and hope that it kind of can get in the way of this opposing Bone Crusher Giant. But now Logan also has access to a chop down here from the Giant Killer, right? So he can use that to kill Bone Crusher Giant and continue putting on pressure, or just resolve Showdown of the Skalds.
I know what I'm voting for. Slam that Showdown.
I mean, draw 4 is
it's really tough
hard to pass up.
Right, and the interesting part is, even if Seth does go for Bone Crusher Giant here, there's a chance that it won't have a profitable block, depending on how the Showdown situation goes.
I mean, this is going to be such a huge turn. The thing is, Logan has drew a land here, so he's guaranteed to be able to chop down here if he wants, right? Mm-hmm. So he can go Showdown of the Skalds here. It's going to resolve. Mystical Dispute won't counter this spell. And if you can find a land off of that, or just play a land, you can chop down the Bone Crusher Giant, and all of a sudden, you have access to 4 new cards to look at next turn.
That's right, and you know how it goes. The turn after, the +1/+1 counters start flying around, and all of a sudden, blockers that are left over for Seth don't look so good anymore. So, very difficult spot here.
Yeah, the other option Logan is looking at, and this is the more aggressive line, right, is to go Giant Killer, chop down, kill the Bone Crusher Giant, attack for 5, put your opponent to 5. Now that he's drawn the Needle Verge pathway, then play Giant Killer, right? Mm-hmm. Play the Giant Killer. If Seth plays the other Bone Crusher Giant that's exiled, you can just tap that down and attack for lethal.
Right. Very aggressive line here from Logan. I love that he's seen it. It's really great when you see a player, perhaps change gears, right? He was kind of building up till this Showdown of the Skalds turn, and finally got the window to do it, but had the presence of mind to check out the scene to make sure that it actually wasn't the best play. And this Bone Crusher Giant just is not going to be enough. As you mentioned, your line, Paul, gets the win here.
Yeah. However, I mean, Logan still has to be careful here, right? There's still 2 mana up. You could still be looking at a Stomp. You could still be looking at a Petty Theft here. But I mean, he kind of played out this line in such a fashion where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of go for this, right?
You can see he's thinking it through. The way that it's panned out here as well, with another land off the top of the library. He even has the follow-up Jegantha just in case this plan didn't work.
Honestly, he could also try to bait a counter. Like, Seth can't counter the Showdown of the Skalds, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I suppose either way.
Right. You go for the attack. If Seth has something, which of course he doesn't, that's just the game. So
really well played by Logan there. Again, when you get into the depth of the lines of play for players at this level, it's really interesting to see when they change, right? When the most obvious straightforward line kind of comes to fruition, but actually there's an unintuitive but better look to it. And that's exactly what Logan found, and that earned him game number 1. Logan Nettles is now a game away in this match from winning it and picking up his 12th win, which, by the way, would put him at 12-1 against this field and lock him for top 8, such that even his day would be over, Paul. You don't actually even play the rest of your matches once you get to that magical 12th win. So he's really, really close here.
Yeah, he gets to take 2 rounds off, start thinking about, turn 4 Indomitable Creativities on his opponents with no interaction. Keep in mind, too, by the way, when Logan does pick up his 12th win, each round that he doesn't play counts as a win to his overall record and overall standings. So Logan Nettles will be the guaranteed first seed going into the top 8.
There you go. Super exciting for Logan.
Yeah.
I did hear Cedric mention this before when these two players played. It's pretty funny to look at the trophy situations, right? Seth just has this entire desk full of trophies, and Logan has a plaque.
Yeah.
He's got the.
You got to get started somewhere, right? You got to get started somewhere.
It is just kind of funny, but the truth of the matter is that Logan's done a ton of his work online play, and when it comes to matchups and skill level here, these two players are right there with each other.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps one of the scariest people to play against online.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only scarier screen name that you could probably run into would be Seth. Basically, like he is definitely on the list as one of the scariest. His screen name is Seth Manfield. I don't know if you've ever.
I just don't believe that still. I just don't think that's a thing.
Well, if you ever see the screen name, I'm just telling you. You want to run from that one. Just save your time. Right click and seed that one.
Now look, Seth has a hand. I mean, look at this hand.
Woo! That's some business.
Wow. Hey, but at the same time, Logan Nettles, if he can string together some lands, Seth does not have an answer to Showdown of the Skulls, right? He can kill everything. Mm-hmm. But if that Showdown of the Skulls resolves, I mean, that's going to be a lot of cards for Logan Nettles.
All right, so Clearing Spirit on turn 2, where it really does shine, can spit out a bunch of tokens, but of course, Seth with the answer. He's going to follow up with Expressive Iteration, and if he can hit a land, particularly an untapped red source, he can leave up Frostbite. If not, he'll probably just have to play the land and play the Frostbite later. He does have, he ended up hitting an island, but he has a backup land in hand with Fabled Passage. What do you see in here, Paul?
I am seeing a lack of lands here from Logan Nettles, and Seth already with about as ideal of a hand as you can have in this matchup. Mm-hmm. But the fact that Logan couldn't find those lands is going to just make this even worse. I mean, Seth, it looks like he's going to, potentially run away with it here. He can kill Clarion Spirit. He's got his lands. He's got the Goldspan Dragon. He's got the card advantage with the Stomps and the Expressive Iteration in hand. I mean, Logan's going to have to fight through a lot here. And Chad is mentioning here, and this is I actually knew this. I just had forgotten, but Seth's screen name on Magic Online is Egderb, which is the backward spelling of bridge, as his he does play a lot of bridge, and his father was a professional bridge player.
By the way, both Seth and Paulo, big bridge enthusiasts. Is that maybe we should start playing bridge, Paul? And
maybe that'll take our game
champs?
to the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is. I mean, if Logan can't find okay, that was big.
That was big. It's a red mana source here. That's exactly what he needed. That can open up the door for Chop Down. He could go for Redain, even a Spellbinder.
I think you go for Spellbinder, but it's going to be unfortunate for him because Seth's hand is amazing. They're just okay, I'm going to go with Spellbinder. He's already used a bunch of removal spells. If I just take one of them, maybe that'll slow him down enough. But now you also have to worry about this Goldspan Dragon. If Seth finds an untapped land next turn, being able to go Goldspan Dragon into one of your 2-mana removal spells is just devastating.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught that, but Logan, when he first saw the hand, he was like nodding like, okay, yeah, you got some business. And then he took his time to make the decision, and he's like, there's no great option here. Like, this kind of stinks for me. Expressive Iteration now for Manfield.
Every time your opponent every time my opponent casts that against me, I just die a little inside.
Seriously. And, especially when they had, like in this case, Seth had all the cheap removal plus multiple Expressive Iteration. It just feels like it's so difficult to come back from that when you're a small creature deck.
I mean, these adventure creatures are already built in 2-for-1s, right? I mean, how many cards ahead is Seth already at this point, right? Mm-hmm. We've got 2 more Bone Crusher Giants, 3 copies of, I believe he's cast 3 Expressive Iterations. Oh, no, 2.
2.
There's the counter there.
Yeah, you get your handy dandy counter. Run afoul off the top of the library here for Logan. Yeah, that might come in handy. There is a gold span dragon on the horizon, but it's a ways off. Here comes Giant Killer, or I should say Chop Down.
That's a lot of Bone Crusher Giants.
Yes, it is. Is that all of them? Yes, it is.
That is all of that. I wonder if Seth is. I mean, he doesn't really have a great thing to play. So curious to see if he just chooses to run out a Bone Crusher Giant here, as try to press the advantage while Logan has been missing some land drops here.
Yeah, just go for the old stomp into Bone Crusher. 5 mana, not a bad play. Another land off the top here though for Logan. He does have another Chop Down in hand. And if he can somehow stabilize, double Showdown of the Scalds is a great way to free yourself of this.
But he's taking so much damage. Every Bone Crusher Giant, he's taking 4 damage.
That's right.
Seth is stomping him to the face, and then playing the Bone Crusher Giant, and then you're gonna have to kill it, and take an additional 2.
So he's gonna take 16 from Bone Crushers.
and Seth is 1 mana away from playing out that Goldspan Dragon.
Well, I think that's the only thing that Logan is hoping for here.
Oh, you're right, because of the Run-a-Foul, yeah.
Run-a-Foul's like, that's one way he can get back on mana a little bit, and he has found yet another land.
Yeah, and he's at a Chop Down, so this Bone Crusher Giant is a problem.
It is. He can chump block it for a while. He could go for Showdown, take the hit, but yikes. Is there any way out for Logan Nettles? He's just 1 game away from a top 8 here, but finds himself in game 2, up a game against Seth Manfield in a very precarious situation. And yeah, it looks like he's just going to go for Showdown of the Scalds here.
Maybe hoping for a red cap melee?
He hit one.
Okay. I mean, that's the answer that you want. Now the question is, does he have a second mountain?
Where?
There's a lot of lists that play 1 mountain. I'm gonna take a look here just to see if he does.
He has 1 mountain in his
He has
library.
1 mountain, so he can't actually red cap melee the Bone Crusher Giant. Because it's in play right now.
Oh no. Oh, that's brutal. He doesn't have a red source to get with Fabled Passage.
Maybe he should have played the Needle Verge Pathway
instead
of
taking the land from the Showdown, which is of course your natural inclination.
Right. I mean, regardless, Logan is very behind here, right? Like, even if he did the red cat melee, but that would have made it so that he could get the Bone Crusher Giant off the battlefield and be at 6 life. Now, if he kills the Bone Crusher, he just dies to a stomp.
That's right. Yeah, I don't think there's any way out for him at this point. I mean, he can cast creatures and block a bunch.
Yeah, that would be the go-to here.
They're just going to get ran over.
Also, I mean, you can also just hope they don't have the 4th Bone Crusher Giant, right? That's really unlikely thing to happen. So you can just play as if your opponent doesn't have Bone Crusher Giant number 4. There's no other source of direct damage in the deck, so...
Yeah, that seems to be the only option here for Nettles. Okay, let's get some counters flowing here. Elite Spellbinder on the stack. Giant Killer perhaps going to pick up a +1/+1 counter from the Showdown. But you can see in Logan's expression, it looks like he's not feeling super confident about how this is going. Let's put it that way.
Right. I mean, Seth just has so many different great options here. You can Fire Prophecy. You can Fire Prophecy so that you can, tuck away the Ox of Agonis. Try to find land number 7 to cast that Goldspan Dragon. I mean, he can cast 3 spells this turn. He can go Petty Theft, Fire Prophecy, and Stomp.
Boy, so close here for Jabberwocky.
And is it on?
Not a lot of good news there.
Yeah.
If you're sitting in Logan's seat.
It's like, I guess I won't take the Ox. Yeah, no matter what he takes, I mean, Logan's going to be, excuse me, Seth is going to be able to play two pieces of disruption here.
And it looks like it's going to be Brazen Borrower. Seth still has options here on Logan's end step.
Yeah, so Seth can go, if he wants to put even more pressure, he could just cast Brazen Borrower here, although that would mean that he doesn't play any removal spells. He could also just try to kill all the creatures that's on Logan Nettles' side of the battlefield, right? I mean, there is that red cat melee. Now, if Seth does use the Bone Crusher Giant to stomp the Elite Spellbinder, that does mean that Logan can safely play red cat melee.
And that will get a counter, right?
To
save the killer?
And to kill the Bone Crusher. But right now, because he knows Seth's hand, he can't red cat melee the Bone Crusher Giant or he'll just die.
Right.
Because Seth will just stomp Logan's face.
That's right. Yeah. Targeting the Bone Crusher is off the menu. And
unless Seth casts Stomp on Spellbinder.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is why it's important that Seth is firing off this Fire Prophecy now, because that Showdown triggered ability is still looming.
Yeah,
and now we're going to see Brazen Borrower, or I should say Petty Theft, to get the binder out of the way.
Yeah, and this
he's
will,
just gonna go ahead and counter it, but that is going to do it. As his Elite Spellbinder is going to jump back, and with a Stomp in hand here for Manfield, he just has to go through the motions and pick up game number 2. Wow. Really close. You know, you feel like in the middle part of that game, Logan had no wiggle room whatsoever, but maybe there was a little window with 2 more life there. It's really hard to speculate at this point, but very, very close game number 2. And with a few land drops earlier, Logan would have had a much easier time of it. In the meantime, Seth says, okay, game number 3. Seth's at 10-2. He's looking to pick up 2 of the next 3 rounds to make yet another top 8. Logan Nettles has it right in front of him. All he has to do is pick up this game 3 victory over one of the toughest players on the planet, and he'll have top 8. You can see Logan looking at the sky, shaking his head, talking to himself, getting himself back into game mode. Hey, that was a tricky game, and there were some judgment calls in there that I think he would take back if he could.
Yeah, I think the big one for him is the Red Cat melee and the Mountain.
Right.
I think like there was only so much Logan could have done that game, but I think that's the one play where you can look back and be like, okay, I have this Red Cat melee. I'm just going to fetch a Mountain and kill this Bone Crusher Giant, and you're like, oh wait. I only have 1 Mountain in this deck.
Right.
But at the same time, unclear Logan would have even won that game. Seth's hand was incredible. 4 Bone Crusher Giants. Keep in mind that Goldspan Dragon was still exiled, right? That was very close to coming into play. If the game was going to grind on a little bit longer, Seth might have kept the Ox of Agonis. So, you know, it could have gone anyway. I think the big thing for Logan was just the Red Cat melee, and also just the fact that he wasn't able to string together the lands necessary to fight through all those removal spells with the Showdown of the Skulls. They just came down a little too late.
Yeah, there were certainly sequences that could have let him in as well. You know, that run afoul, you know, if there was a turn in the last few turns where Seth just runs out of dragon and a run afoul gets snapped off, I mean, that's a huge tempo swing back in Logan's favor. And given that he missed some land drops early in the game, that's the kind of play that could have potentially got him back in, but it didn't play out like that. We've got game number 3 now. How does this opening hand look for Logan?
It needs a little more action. You don't have anything to play on turn 2, and you have a turn 3 Elite Spellbinder. Meanwhile, Seth just has a fantastic hand again. You know, you got the Frostbite here into another Frostbite, so just can really hold off what Logan does early, and then just kind of get ahead with those iterations. And Logan really wants to find something, not finding it here. So
Boy.
a very, very slow start here for Logan. Going to really need to draw a Showdown of the Skalds. That's going to be really, really big for him. Because you saw Seth actually boarded out almost all of his counter spells in this matchup. So
He's becoming a much more kill the things on the board type deck. It makes a lot of sense too, because when you see Naya Adventures, you might be thinking of some of the bigger creatures in the Naya color trio, but this is very much a small creature deck here for Logan. Most of his creatures die to Frostbite, for example.
Yep. And good opportunity to play out the tap land. Still have access to the Frostbite, and then next turn probably going with that iteration.
Well, so Elite Spellbinder for this turn.
Yeah, and
He's going to show him the bad news.
Yeah, and that's definitely getting shocked here from the
Frostbite's,
Frostbite.
Yep, going to take it down, and then he gets to look at the hand, and it's just all action. Really tough here for Logan. Sure, there's nothing at the exact moment that's going to kill you, but Logan looks down at his hand and sees that he doesn't have any action. He just has no pressure at all. Expressive iteration, was that Galliseth off the top? Oh,
that was Galliseth. Very, very good for Seth. But of course, Logan with the one of Runafowl here with the clean answer to Galliseth.
Oh man, I got you to say Galliseth once. I'm so happy right now.
I just realized that I said it, and I am so sad.
Just got you so good.
God,
You're
Marshall.
part of the problem now.
Jeez.
Oh, so good. Galazeth Prismari hits the battlefield, but before anything can happen with regards to treasure tokens, it's going to get killed by Runafowl. Now, gosh, another land off the top here for Nettles. Now, he does have Gigantha at the ready, but that's kind of it. Like, he's out of gas. He's going to need to see
Seth
Showdown or something like that.
Seth can go red cap melee, not lose a land because Gigantha's red, and then stomp it with the Bonecrusher Giant.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Could even play the Bonecrusher Giant if he wanted to this turn. It would be at the cost of a treasure.
Sure. That doesn't seem bad, though. This deck isn't like some of the others that really need to save up the treasures for really expensive spells. And here we go. 4 damage to the Gigantha. Bonecrusher Stomp is going to get it, and...
Yep. That's a nice turn.
That's a great turn for Manfield. This is huge, and it's another land off the top. The best he's going to be able to do is a Tangled Florahedron. Pure misery now for Nettles, who needs to find Showdown of the Skalds like in a couple of turns, probably.
Yeah, and Seth probably just going to hold off on the iteration here and just keep applying pressure. I mean, we have a Bonecrusher Giant in play. We've got that Faceless Haven, so, I mean, you can just go ahead and stomp this Florahedron and cast the Bonecrusher Giant and attack, and next turn, that's 12 damage that Seth is presenting. Keep in mind, the card that gets Logan out of this is a Showdown of the Skald, so, you know, killing the Tangle Florahedron is probably not bad.
Mm-hmm. Looks like he's going to cast the expensive Expressive Iteration, perhaps looking for a counter or something, maybe to cut off that line of play.
Oh, man.
He doesn't find one. He finds a Frostbite.
This is, what, 7 Bonecrusher Giants between these the last two games?
He's just Bonecrusher flooded. Big draw step here for Logan.
Showdown?
It's a giant killer. That could have been worse. It is not going to get him out of the mess, but it will at least stem the bleeding a little bit. Chop down the Bonecrusher. Do you play the giant killer? Do you hope to draw an Innkeeper and then play it? You just play it. Okay.
Yeah, just playing it.
We've seen no Innkeepers from Logan Nettles this match.
I mean, look at Seth. I mean, that's a Goldspan Dragon off the top here. So now we can go Goldspan Dragon, attack, treasure, play a Bonecrusher, and also Frostbite this Giant Killer. Because Seth is going to be killing this Giant Killer here, and that presents a lethal attack next turn. Wow.
Tangled Florahedron off the top, Paul. This is one of those draws that is not going to cooperate with Logan Nettles here. Really tough. You know, he really does rely on the combination of Showdown of the Skalds and Edgewall Innkeeper to keep the cards flowing. And if he doesn't see those, it gets kind of ugly, right? I mean, you're drawing a lot of single cards that don't generate advantage on their own. And, you know, a Jespera's Sentinel here doesn't do anything. Even an Edgewall Innkeeper is terrible at this point. Clarion Spirit, Drannith Magistrate, you know, even an elite spellbinder at this point of the game doesn't do that much. He really needed to sort of combine those cards earlier, and they were not there for him. His deck abandoning him when he needed it most.
Yeah, and Seth is going to take it down here, so Logan still has to keep fighting it out here to get that spot into the top 8. Of course, 2 more opportunities here for Logan, and also this means that Seth is 1 step closer.
Yep, 1 step, and he's 1 step away would be another way to put it, Paul, because he will have 2 opportunities to win a match and lock up the top 8. Now, the good news for Logan Nettles, he has the same thing. He has the next 2 rounds, win one of them, and we'll find him in the top 8.